So we're continuing our walk, and in case you didn't realize it, we're in the Medea Creek Natural Park. It runs right through the Santa Monica Mountains recreation area in our WUI, our Wildland Urban Interface. We're just following the creek, and we're following it to the side that branches off to the east into a first order stream. And here we can see something that's kind of interesting. It's a big dead bunch of trees. Looks like it's like willow trees. And these provide important places for animals to live in and to nest. So this is why these are never removed or cleaned up, so to speak, because they really need to be here like this. And in nature, no one would be cleaning this up. So I can hear kind of birds going through it and around here. I just heard a crow. And it can be a really great place for a habitat. This is a great plant. This is a great plant that you see around here. And this one's called sugar bush, or you might call it a sumac. That's another name for it. Now, you've heard that word before. There's even a school named that nearby. And also, look at this. All this beautiful new growth. It says to itself, I think it's going to rain soon. I'm going to put out a bunch of new growth. It's going to be beautiful. Again, most plants do this in the spring, but native California plants do it in the fall. Beautiful sugar bush or sumac. In fact, look at this one. Look here. We have some really neat flowers that are starting to come out and bloom. And they're going to attract all kinds of insects, including native California bees. Did you know that there's about 1,500 species of bees in California? And 1,499 of them are natives. But the one you see the most is a honeybee, and that's not native. They were brought here. But there's a lot of native bees. You have to look closely to see if you can find them. I don't see any here today. But this would be a good place to look for them because they like to go on native plants and flowers. This is a big bunch of sumac. Again, right along our trail here along the creek. Now, I'm in a part of the creek where I can see a bunch of different kinds of plants. So this is what we call Mexican feathergrass. So it's native here. It goes all the way from a little bit north of here all the way down to Argentina. So it's not exactly, just a California native like a lot of these plants. Here's a bunch of sumac up here. Here it is. The sumac we were looking at before. Remember, do you recognize this one? The coyote bush? Yeah. And if I look over here, if we can go up a little bit, there we have a really neat oak tree. Let's see if we can zoom in on it and see what it is. By looking at the leaves, you can tell it's a valley oak. Another oak tree over here. There's some willow trees over there on the other side. Yep. Coming across over here, I can see, let's see what we got going here. We got some coyote bush, and above that, I see some tree tobacco. There's some, and here's some more on this side. Coming up, here's a bunch of tree tobacco growing amongst the sumac. So, wow, look how fast we learned something about these plants and trees that you probably walk by all the time and didn't know their name. Oh, so we just come across another plant we haven't seen. This is kind of an interesting one. It's a feathery looking thing. It's also looking really green and growing a lot right now. Looks like it might want to bloom or something. At least it's got a lot of new growth on it. This is called tamarisk. That's probably a word you've heard before around in Southern California. But it's a tamarisk bush. Very happy right here. And I'm coming over here into the creek area. I wanted to show you something I thought was interesting. So if you can see it now, there's this really interesting tree branch here. And it looks to me like this is an oak tree that maybe fell over in the wind and then was burned in the fire, in the Woolsey fire. So we know that the Woolsey fire came straight through this creek area. You wouldn't really know it now because everything has kind of come back a couple years later. This thing is still, the trunk of this tree is still quite blackened, as you can see. It's making kind of a cool bridge over this area. It's kind of a good time to tell you about how, like all of these plants that we've seen actually don't care that much about fires. The oak trees have very thick bark. They call it the cambium. It's very thick, and the fires don't really bother them very much. They may look black and burns all the leaves off after the fire, and you think, oh my God, the tree is dead. But come the next spring, after some rains, the fires usually happen in the fall. Then they start to come green just like this. So they can manage living in the fire. Our houses and things like that, of course, don't. But we've decided that we wanted to live in these areas like this, so we're in an area where there's going to be fires. Normally, in the chaparral, which is this kind of area, what we call a chaparral, the fires burn about every 20 years or so. But that doesn't mean that they can't burn more frequently. And we've been seeing them more frequently in our area, probably because of a lot of different reasons. Like, we think the last one was started by power lines. So that's not really a natural cause of a fire. So that's one of the reasons we probably have them more frequently than nature would probably give us. But then people do things where, like, this looks like a oak tree. It's a valley oak that maybe somebody planted. It just kind of looks like it, doesn't it? Something unusual about the oak trees, however, if you look at them over here, is that you see them growing together. And why do you think that is? And that's because, think about it for a second. We know that oak trees reproduce by producing acorns, and the acorns fall around the oak trees, and then little saplings grow from there. Something weird about trees, or interesting maybe, I don't know if it's weird, but when the trees start to grow that are related to the tree that they fell from, or that they came off their roots or their acorns, they will sort of take care of these trees, because sometimes they're in the dark because of the shade from them. And then what happens is that the trees are able to care for their, if you want to call them their children, by feeding them. Their roots connect, and then they grow. And then eventually, when the parent tree passes away or dies from the wind or age, then the little tree has a better chance of living, because it needs the light to live. So you can see that they kind of grow in these little groups like this. So these trees are more than likely related to each other. If we were to test their DNA, we could determine that. And if we see over here, for example, if we observe carefully this valley oak, which is a really beautiful tree, part of it looks like it's dead on this side. And the reason for that is that the live oaks that are around it are shading it, so that those the leaves on that side of the tree are of no more use to the tree, so it doesn't keep them going. So it looks like they just sort of die. But this tree, if you look up at the top, has plenty of green ones, so it's perfectly fine. It manages to adapt in the shade and just grows higher and higher. And it's not letting the neighbors here that it's not very happy with, shading itself, it's not letting it bother it too much. Here's another plant we haven't seen yet. It looks similar to some other ones, so it can be a little bit tricky, but this one is what we call a longleaf wattle, W-A-T-T-L-E, I think. And what's interesting about wattles is that they can be used in building things. And we believe that the Chumash, who were the Native American or the indigenous people who lived in this area of Oak Park, may have used these for building different kinds of dwellings. So they're a native.